Hello and welcome to the morning sports briefing. No, what am I talking about? Morning sports briefing. Sorry, there was no morning sports briefing this morning because, hey, I've got a bit of a sore throat, been overdoing it a bit recently. So hence, yes, it says I wish this was beer. It's not. It's hot lemon and honey. Welcome to the Super Rugby AU Round 1 review. And I'm going to lean on these other three guys, as you can tell, because, hey, I'm all a bit bunged up, not feeling great. But joining me from the deep south, we have Steve, or Cornflake, or even a good-looking Steve, as John used to say. How you doing down there?
Jeez, I haven't heard that one for a while. Good. Another beautiful day down here in paradise, eh? So, yep, all is well.
Well, hey, you know what? It's Super Rugby, so hence we've got to we're back into it. It's bring out all the old cliches. Remember, folks, it's early doors. We've got a few more rounds to go. We have Stephen.
Full credit.
Full credit.
Yeah.
And we have Stephen from the far north. How you doing, sir?
Very good, thank you, Paul. Privilege and a pleasure. I suspect, though, you've lost your voice due to that a little trip you had on the jet boat. You were screaming so hard as you were going around the course, you completely lost your voice. So I think that's really the crux of it, isn't it?
Absolutely. Well, it might have been if it wasn't. That was last weekend, not even this weekend. So that was 7 days ago. But folks, do check out New Zealand Sports Radio Facebook page where you can see me. As Stephen says, getting absolutely scared, being spun round a track. Look, Cornflake even said the editing looked almost professional. Actually, no, he actually didn't look professional. I don't believe him. I think he's being nice. But my first attempt at real editing there on that video. Also joining us is the man from the Safe Rugby Tackle Framework, and thankfully we're not reviewing the Gallagher Premiership. Otherwise, 5 red cards in, he would have plenty to say. So how are you doing?
I am very well. Thank you very much for having me on the show, and it's nice to be on this panel with some esteemed company, and no doubt Steve Cornflake down south, you'll be very happy with the Highlanders form line. So am I with that early form line. If you recall, last time we were online together, I did tip the Highlanders to be the long shot, and having seen some of that preseason form, yeah, they're looking very good. I'm very happy that the Blues did what they did yesterday. I have to say, I wasn't expecting them to win at all. In fact, given the disruptions they've had, much thanks to level 3, I was actually expecting to get a bit of a hiding, but surprise, boy, they really turned up and did the damage.
I'll save those hidings for when the season really gets underway. That's when we'll see the Blues get smashed. Don't worry, it's coming.
I knew you'd say that.
You think we might have something like a Clermont versus Bayonne, which finished 73 to 3 in the top 14. Hopefully, we don't see anything like that in the Super Rugby.
Pretty sure it's round 1, isn't it? Highlanders Crusaders, Forsyth Bar, 73-3 to the home team, of course.
Well, hey, that's the order that we said it in, 73-3. So yeah, must be to the home team, as you say.
Brilliant! Can't wait.
That'd be about 100 to 1 odds for that happening.
I was going to say, anybody out there who thinks about gambling, do not follow Cornflake's advice on that one. Talking of gambling, something I am going to give a go to is something called Sports Forecast. You'll be able to join that with a promo code coming up. But so folks, that's keep a lookout for that, because some interesting stuff going on there with that the old algorithm people are doing around the old betting as well. So, but hey, we're here to talk about some rugby games that happened. First up, Queensland Reds versus the New South Wales Waratahs. We were a bit active on the old Facebook Messenger chatting about this one, weren't we, boys? Look, Waratahs turned up and scored a try in 2 minutes. I mean, they looking good. It was all going to be one-way traffic, wasn't it? Huh?
Well, it was good for they need a bit of Viagra after 2 minutes. It just went real flat. Turned into a bit of a mismatch, really. And then that second half was really difficult to watch. It was a real hard watch because the game was kind of drifting in and out and was quite lackluster, lots of stoppages. But one thing I have to say was there was a highlight in the game, the referees and the touch judges talking to each other and trying to speed the game up. one area of the game which has been debated a lot has been the scrums. It was really nice to see. There was a lot of encouragement for the players to get on with it. But apart from that first half, the Reds pretty much killed it off. And of course, that red card, which was a very deserved red card, I must say, for utter stupidity. And it was a very dangerous tip tackle. That's the sort of stuff we need to get out of the game, get rid of it. But apart from that, 41-7, I think the scoreline pretty much reflected how bad the Waratahs were. And I think it's only going to get more difficult for them unless, of course, they can change things around.
Now, here we are, kind of a couple of minutes in, and we've just started talking about, and Bo's decided to have the entire game all in one go. I asked you for your thoughts in the first 2 minutes, and you've gone and done, geez, does anyone follow script or it's like herding cats. That's what I say. Steve, look, you love your old card count, and let's be honest, that tip tackle was a red card any day of the week. That's nothing about the new laws, is it?
No. Well, yeah, it's been a long time. It's been like that, hasn't it? You drop a guy on his head like that, do that sort of thing. What made it worse, it was so off the play and not off. The ball was gone. The play had sort of carried on. Nothing was really happening there, and he just did something so stupid and brain explosion sort of stuff. You just make wonder what's going through his head at that time, and to make a decision to try and put a guy down like that when he's not even in the play. The play's completely gone. But yeah, what was that?
Rugby league player, isn't he? Just positioned over.
Well, what was really weird is he was a former Red. So that made it kind of a bit ironic as well. He's moved over to the Waratahs, and then he just goes and helps the old boys out. Here you go, lads. You're already killing us anyway. Just have a little go, have a little extra. I'll go take an early shower and let someone else come on 20 minutes later, which I thought big talking point from that match is the first time we've seen that happen, isn't it? The red card with the replacement after 20 minutes coming on. So, as a spectacle for that sort of things, I don't think it really changed anything because, like Boa says, the game was already carted by that point, and that extra player coming on, I guess it did even it up. But I mean, the Reds played a smart game. That early start, Jake Gordon, probably the only good player that wore blue in that whole matchup. For the Waratahs, he was a standout for them. He's injured now, so that's down the toilet for them completely. But here, here's standout. The Reds are in control throughout that match.
Stephen, the penalty count 14 to the Reds, 16 for the Waratahs. We had that guy coming back from the red card. Do you think that was so? I guess are you with Steve around that? Didn't really make much difference the new law, and what do you think about the penalty count? Is that as we get at the beginning of tournaments, referees being hard on things, and that so the players will adjust?
I think the damage was already done when the red card was given, but I thought the Waratahs were better for the first 30 minutes of the second half. I thought they showed a bit of fight, and it wasn't until the last 10 minutes or so that the Reds scored another couple of tries to really get on top of them, and they just really got that authority through their scrum. They were very, very dominant at scrum time. Listen, I think the Waratahs are in a very similar situation to where the Reds were probably about 3 seasons ago, where they're basically starting to rebuild. And all I'm really looking for this Waratahs side is any young players that they've got that are just starting to stand out. And listen, the second 5 Walton really impressed me when he did get a little bit of go forward ball. He looks like he's got footwork, can beat a player. But boy, on saying that, also not having a lot of experience, and as mentioned before, losing Gordon for the season is going to be a bit of a tough ask for these guys. One guy I did keep an eye on though was Sam Kidd, former Northern boy. I was really impressed with his work rate. Put a lot of work in and around the paddock, but boy, in that last 10 minutes or so, they were pretty much chasing shadows, especially with that scrum dominance that the Reds had. Yeah,
when you're bringing Tupu off the bench, I mean, look, the bench, the Reds really had a bunch of finishers, as Eddie would say, whereas the Waratahs had a bunch of guys who, well, we'll bring on because we need somebody. Different kettle of fish, and you say the game was gone by then. Anyway, one of the things that I liked about the Reds was as soon as it looked like it was semi-broken play, their players the support players were very much deliberately running offloading support lines, not rucking support lines, and that they were very clearly trying to keep that ball alive and move it quickly. Very different to say Joe Smith's Island, where those players would have been arriving a bit later deliberately to get quick ball from the ruck. But yes, clear. It was very clear to see the intent of the Reds, which I think was good to see. Any sort of final comments, boys, around that? Any players that stood out, or any particular other sort of tactics that you saw from this game?
Yeah, look, a couple of things I just want to quick mention. Harry Wilson, the back row for the Reds, he had a tremendous game, and I think one key aspect to his game, he's really changed his tackle technique. If you recall, last international season, he was a deserved recipient of a red card for going in high. He made some tremendous tackles around the chest area and below, and he forced 2 solid turnovers. And also the Reds winger, Daigunu, out on the wing. Every single time, it was a very clear game plan. They wanted to shift the ball out wide. And Paul, you make a very valid comment on how they ran into the gaps and looked for that offload game. And I think the Reds can continue on this way, build on some form, and they're going to be a very interesting proposition, especially against a team like the Brumbies, who like to play a very structured defense.
Yeah, some stats for you. Dongunu, 9 runs, 99 meters carried. The next highest I can find is about 54 meters, so nearly twice as much as anybody else. 3 clean breaks and 6 defenders beaten. Very dangerous player with ball in hand. Perhaps not so much on the defensive side. Look, initially, that was one of the big things this year, defensively. Waratahs missed a whole bunch of tackles. The Reds were good tackling in the first half. They fell off the whole bunch in the second half, mind you, to even up the stats. But by then, as you say, the game was gone, so who cares? Whereas, some of Horton, the hooker for the Waratahs, missed 4 tackles, made 6. Not a great ratio from him. And Harrison and Gordon, I think, missing 3 and 2 respectively. They're going to see plenty of traffic down their channel this season with those kind of stats.
Guys, one last shout, just with that red card. This rule about replacing players after 20 minutes, beg your pardon. That's the sort of foul play red cards are there for. So it kind of made a mockery of the whole thing once you had that option of replacing players. So again, this is where the limitations of some of the innovations, where they're trying to be too cute, and they just got to really simplify it and keep things simple, because that piece of foul play to me looked quite deliberate. And fortunately, Hunter Paisami didn't land on his head, because if he did, that it could have been a broken neck.
That's the whole point of the red card is not so much to in this one but it's to be a deterrent. So look, it's such a big loss for your team that you don't do it. By replacing the player after 20 minutes, to me, you reduce that deterrent, and therefore I think I'm anti the 20-minute replacement. But I know a lot of people. I know that's an unpopular opinion. We'll see how it impacts things, because I don't think we had one last season in Super Rugby Aotearoa, or we did have one. It was like within the last 10 minutes, within the last 20 minutes anyway. So it didn't actually come into effect. So we'll see. We'll see if it makes what things from here. Simon says, look, it's a bad sign for Australian rugby when Waratahs doing badly. Yes, true, but they have lost 15 international players in the last 2 years, which is one hell of a player drain. Sure, Hooper's coming back. He's one of those 15. But even so, that's one hell of a player drain for the Waratahs in there.
Don't worry about Hooper. We'll just scrap him. He can go, because I think you talked earlier about standout players, and I mean, I struggled to pick standout players in that Waratahs team. Jake Gordon, who I mentioned before, I thought was the number one standout by far, but I'd probably give a bit of credit to that young Tizano guy. He played fairly well for a newcomer into that team. Nobody didn't know who he was. I think his task against what was a pretty established and outstanding back row of Fraser McWright and, like Boz mentioned, Harry Wilson, they were outstanding. And Tizano, I think, did a fairly good role in that for the Waratahs. But a guy I think probably won't get mentioned, but Uru, what's his first full name? I can't find it now. But Uru, the second rower, he was phenomenal. He was a massive ball carrier for the Reds. A huge part, a great game from him. He's carried strongly. He was an open play. He's a big, powerful player, and he's come from nowhere as well. So he had a really, really outstanding game for the Reds. But it's that back row, isn't it? That was outstanding. It's going to continue to be like that for the Reds, I think, in seasons coming. James O'Connor, you got to put him. He outclassed the young Harrison. As much as I love Will Harrison, I think he's a great little player and a huge future. O'Connor really played that role really, really well. He got his 50-22, and he kind of that was mission sorted for the day for James O'Connor. He loves those, so he's good. But one thing I did want to mention when we talk about players, good and bad, you see those Facebook pages and you see they quite often do it with New Zealand Rugby, and they go, the journeyman. How you get, those guys that play forever and ever at clubs into Mitre 10 Cup level and things like that. They never eventuate to anything. Jack Maddox, Australian Rugby, number 1 on your list. He is a guy who's just he's going nowhere now. I can't see much of a future for him at all. He has been such a massive talent. And now I struggle to even see him playing at this level. He just doesn't add enough what a fullback can do or wherever they decide to play him for the Waratahs. So ultimately, a big signing, disappointing, but the Reds far superior, as we all expected. Who lost the faith in that opening 5 minutes? Not me. No one.
Yes, I put a tweet out that in that opening 5 minutes, my $3 was in trouble. But plenty of Waratahs fans came back and told me, no, don't worry, you're safe. It proved to be. A couple of points there. Jack Maddox, I think you've been a tad harsh on him. 12 carries, 53 metres, by far the top for the Waratahs. At times he did, sort of cleaned up some work in there. Behind that kind of team performance, I think he was always going to struggle.
Should have said the Rebels.
Tizano, though, I've got to say, 25 tackles, only 2 missed. That was, as you say, big shift from the young fella. Let's hope they don't burn him out with that kind of work rate.
Yeah, guys, the other thing is, the Waratahs declined 4 very kickable penalties right in front of the posts. And on 3 occasions, when they declined it, the Reds pretty much went the length of the field through phase play, and then they scored twice. So, again, it just came down to some brain-dead tactics. And also, when they were down to 14 men, really, they should have looked at killing the clock. And, to me, it was just very poor all-round. And Waratahs really didn't belong at that level and that intensity of rugby yesterday.
I think
that's the theme from this weekend was teams turning down 3, not getting it over the line, and the other team marching down the field.
I think the Reds in the second half, especially, you've talked about how the Waratahs, like Stephen says, come back into that game early in the second half. I think the Reds went to half time and Big Bad Brad would have said, "We're in control. This is our game. We're leading 27-7 at the break. They're a man down for almost 20 minutes. It's a simple game plan. It's like if they want to get into the game, they have to make things happen. We don't have to make things happen. We can just go down there, force it into their area." And I think when you got to that final 10 minutes, like was mentioned earlier, and they got a bit fancy and scored a couple of late tries, and the Reds are just like, we've done that. We've forced them to play. Now we're going to have a little bit of fun. Try to the debutant as well, which is always nice to see coming off the bench right at the end. So, I think the Reds has had a better game plan. They started eventually over that first half better, controlled the game, and forced the Waratahs to try and do something they probably didn't want to do. Force them, like you say, to kick to the corner instead of going for the sticks. With Harrison and the team, they'd normally be a team that always go for the 3 points. So they made them uncomfortable, put them in situations they didn't want, and controlled the game through that very dominant first 40 minutes.
Right, let's I think we've covered everything off. Finished 41-7. So Queensland Reds getting obviously the try bonus point win in that one. No losing bonus point for the Waratahs, funnily enough. The quick question in the live chat. Hey guys, any news on David Havili and Will Jordan injuries? I'm afraid not from me. And those are 2 key players for the Crusaders. So wow, not a good pre-season hit out if you've lost a couple of players like that. Through part of it. We'll obviously hopefully here during the week. You guys got any information on those? Lots of shaking heads for those of you guys on the podcast. Great podcasting, guys. I love your work. Moving on then to the second game, and I must admit, I went off to bed at this point before this one. I had a long day. But I have watched it today. Don't worry, I have caught up on it today. Look, for me, this one was for me the Brumbies showed that they are more of a team, whereas Western Force still perhaps individuals. Both sides, though, butchered try-scoring opportunities early on. A forward pass from Banks where basically he could have thrown it anywhere backwards. It could have bounced 3 or 4 times. His winger could have turned around, picked it up, gone off for a coffee, come back, and still scored. He had that much space. So, yeah, butchered opportunities from both sides. So the 11-27 scoreline, not a reflection, actually, on the number of opportunities that we saw in that game.
So if you want to look at a positive, if you want to look at positives before you get too much involved into what happened, a positive, the Western Force know how to play a good game. They know what they have to do. They are just struggling. Maybe, like you say, it's coming down to the teamwork and the continuity of the side, but they know how to play a good game. They know how to clean out rucks really, really fast. They know how to get the ball out. The Brumbies were on the back foot. A lot of that matchup, take the score out of it, and a lot of that game, you could watch it and say the Western Force are the better team here because large periods of that game, they were in the Brumbies half. They had a lot of phases over and over and over again. They were on the attack. They were in the right parts of the field. They just lacked finishing. They just massively lacked finishing. I think that come down to their midfield partnership, I think, was a big problem. So Kahui come in and started in the place of Godwin. I think you just had 2 very similar players. Kahui's not the All Black that he was back when he played, 2011 in those glory days. He's just now a fairly strong lad who just goes crashing right through. And then outside him is another fairly large lad who just goes crashing on through. If you're a winger in that Force team with that sort of lineup, you're struggling. Like how many times we see Byron Ralston in that match? Not enough, in my opinion. He got a few kicks that he come back for, but he didn't get the chances on the outside. Those guys were a bit predictable. They got the good ball, the fast ball, but then straight out, hey, there's Kahui. Poof, there's 3 defenders. He's crushed. Hey, poof, next phase, poof, there's Kurandrani. Another 3 guys take him out. That's it. Another phase down. They needed a bit more something. As much as Godwin's not the player he probably was a couple of years ago either when he's at the Brumbies, I think he might have added a little bit something different as a bit more of a playmaker as opposed to just a bulldozer sort of guy. But I was, from a Force perspective, because I like the underdog sort of team here, I thought they had a good idea. They executed it in patches, and they put the Brumbies under a lot more pressure than they probably would have liked, but they just couldn't execute those finishes. How many tries did they leave out there? Easily, 3 or 4 that maybe last year with that finishing ability that they gave chances to, they might have put a couple more of those away.
So, yeah, just to back you up with those stats there. So, Kahui, 5 passes and 10 runs. When he did pass it, though, Kurandrani, 1 pass, 13 runs. So, as you say, it might have got out and occasionally get out again, but boy, oh boy, did those 2 decide that they were going to truck it up.
Too often.
Yeah, too often, exactly. Stephen?
Yeah, there's a real Dad's Army look about that Western Force back line with Carney there and Kahui and Kurandrani and Godwin's no spring chicken, either sort of thing. And John O'Lance has been around a few different franchises in Australia. So yeah, I suppose for me the thing is I want to see some young talent coming through. We mentioned the Waratahs before. Yeah, they're struggling, but at least you're seeing some new names out on the paddock, and I don't know if they're any better than what they were before. Everything would have to click to go for them, and I think it was important that they got away to a really, really good start, and they did get away to a reasonable start. But the problem is you got to nail those early opportunities to put good teams under pressure. Score a little bit of scoreboard pressure, a couple of early tries, that can swing the momentum big time.
Yeah, I mean the 11-27 makes it look a bit closer than it really was because. It was like, wasn't it 27-6 or something for a long time? So yeah, it was. I'm pretty sure that was a score in the last sort of 5 minutes that made it look slightly more respectable than it was. I mean, there were some nice touches from Rob Carney, who did a cool little banana kick to try and get a 50-22 that just rolled the wrong side of the flag. So you could see that his brain was working, and perhaps the body wasn't quite executing what it used to do. as you say, a bit of a dad's army kind of thing there with this side. And then you also got players like Jamie Thrush in the forwards as well. Lots of the commentators kept on talking about the number of internationals we've seen on the pitch. Yeah, the number of internationals who haven't played for their team in the last 10 years. A tad over the top there, last 5 years maybe. But even so, so it's that's. But in some ways, I think the Force. Look, this was the first time playing at home in Super Rugby in over 3 years, right? 3.5 years now. So you can understand why they've brought in experience to try and build a squad from zero to competitive quickly, and then hopefully we'll see over the next 5 years that they have the proper pathways in the West to bring local players through. Is what you hope for. Bit of nodding there, Bar.
Yeah, look, I'm dead against using these players well past their use-by date, and this sort of thing you see in other sports like professional boxing, where you bring a boxer and an opponent who was a world champion 20 years ago, and then all of a sudden a young buck beats him and says, I beat a former world champion. Only difference is, he or she's well past their mid-40s. So this sort of thing is not productive. And I have a number of friends who coach in Western Australia. They have a very good local club rugby structure and some very good players in there. So they should be really, as a franchise, looking to blood these players in. And this has been a big gripe of some of the local coaches in the Western Australian Union. And again, it shows just a bit of a disconnect between the Force, the main franchise team representing the region, and the provincial club. So again, if you're going to lose, you might as well do that, blooding some young players, giving them experience. And what's the point in going and getting some old war horses and getting the L anyway? So to me, from a coaching point of view, from a player development point of view, it makes zero sense. And all it's doing is, just giving people who used to be superstars a little bit of a limelight. And it's a failed experiment. I mean, so how many teams have tried this in the past and they've failed? So, yeah, what can I say?
One thing I can say, I think Nick White is now is coming top of my list of most annoying players at the moment, with having come back from Exeter Chiefs, which is actually my team, to over in the UK. But he was an annoying player, talking to the referee way too much, and he's not the captain. Would love him to shut up. But he ran that team, and I think we are seeing a lot of play off the nines in both these games, which I think is a kind of the new norm. Is that the fly half only calls it out to him when they can see there's an overlap or a mismatch that they can take on. Otherwise, it's controlled by that by the scrum half there. Look, the Force again. When Nick White was running across them, I think their rush defence, they got it tied in that second half as well, which didn't help things either. But Brumbies and the Reds both notching off pretty comfortable. Well, very comfortable in the case of the Reds, but I think pretty comfortable in the case of the Brumbies, and showing why they're the top two in the conference by some distance.
Yeah. One thing I have to say is the Brumbies, they play a very predictable pattern. It's a 2-2-2 and one man out on the wing, a very predictable attack pattern. But they do it really well. Very clinical. So some early, really good signs that they've put some, real thought into their training runs. But again, if this whole Trans-Tasman Super Rugby goes ahead, and there's teams free to travel, I expect our local teams to really put some big numbers on these Australian teams, because based on what I'm seeing first up, it's very predictable. And also the defensive abilities or the inabilities in the midfield was very blaring to see. For example, in the Brumbies game, the Force got really opened up in that midfield, whereas, as you rightly pointed out, Paul, when the Brumbies started resorting to playing off the nine, running those hard lines very flat, and there were a couple of passes which were, well, I'm being very charitable by saying flat when the referee was right in front of their eyes, but they got away with it. So good on them. But yeah.
I'll be interested to see how this style goes against the Reds for the Brumbies. It's all well and good to sort of suffocate a team like the Force. I think they'll get away against it with the Rebels and the Waratahs as well. They'll just grind those sort of games out like they have here this weekend. But I think against the Reds, we're not going to get that dominance, especially in the pack. If anything, that there'll be a battle / may even go to the Reds side of things in that set piece and those sort of areas. That's going to change things. And the Reds are going to want to run. They want to give the ball to Dalgunu. They want to give the ball to the guys on the outside channels. Paisami, he's a strong runner, but he's also an elusive runner. He gets around men as well as going through men. So they've got a bit more adaptability, a bit more talent, I guess you could say, in that back line. They're gonna give you something else to think about, as well as worrying about their forward pack, who are going to be doing things against you as well. So there's no real safe place. But yeah, like Bo says, you come against those New Zealand teams as well. That is a whole different sort of style completely to what they're going to face in Australia. So if that does happen, the Brumbies probably won't look so bulletproof. But over in Australia, they certainly are. And I think I said that back when this whole Super Rugby AU and Aotearoa thing started, for Australia, this has been a massive opportunity for them to clean out and say, we're only playing Australian teams. We're going to win, we're going to lose, but we're going to win something. Now's the time to bring everyone in. We're not going to go to New Zealand for 3 weeks and just get smashed by 40 points every time. We'll go to Africa and just get hammered away over there. We can bring guys through that are going to build confidence in their ability and know that they can get victories for some of them as well. So that was the ultimate time for them to really bring that new core through, because they're only playing other Australian sides. It's the ultimate time for them to do it without that fear, to be going straight to these young guys to just lose and lose and lose and lose like the Australian teams had been doing. But it's not probably gone, as well as they thought. It's almost this season gone back the other way a little bit as well in some cases. So bit of a shame, but we'll see, what the rest of the season brings. Guys, key players are already getting injured. So they're going to have to bring them up through somewhere. The young guys are going to have to come through, and they're going to have to stand up. They got no choice. It's just the way things go, and we get to see what those guys are made out of. We've already seen all those guys, new players in the Reds, new players in the Brumbies, and they're starting to show. We're talking about guys that didn't exist, 2 weeks ago on the Super Rugby radar. So it's only got to be a positive thing for them if they keep bringing those guys through.
Yeah, I mean, look, we talk about the Brumbies being predictable, and I think a lot of people talk about their line-out maul, but they've developed beyond that line-out maul. It might be predictable, but it's still. I mean, Simone. As that second play, as that playmaking second 5'8" or inside centre, 8 passes, 8 runs. Ikatua, the new 13 there, 6 passes, 9 runs. Muirhead, 8 carries out on one wing. Hansen, 9 carries out on the other wing, with 12 carries, 4 banks and 11 passes. Those backs are willing to play it around amongst each other, which is good to see. Yeah, I think this isn't the same Brumbies side, or as forward dominated Brumbies sides it was, say, 3-4 years ago, where they literally just had that line-out maul and nothing else. I don't
think the Brumbies were probably expecting what they got from the Force in that match either. They got, that line-out maul got stopped from the Force. It wasn't a weapon in that game. The Force knew what was coming, and credit to them, they had the ability to stop it on numerous occasions. So I think the Brumbies probably got a bit put out as to, what's his plan B? Are we going to this already in week 1? What's going on here? They didn't involve, I think, when they do want to play in their backs, they involve Tom Banks a lot more. He didn't get too much, what do you say, 4 runs or something in that? So not as much involvement.
It's 11 runs, 11 passes, 12 runs. It was actually quite
12 runs.
Yeah.
So he did get involved quite a bit, but you didn't see him. You didn't see him too much getting into the broken play and things like that, as you normally would in that back line when they actually try and run things. So yeah, we'll see. They'll adapt. That's not the full hand of the Brumbies. There's no way, especially with the Reds coming up. So, yep, I think they played more than they would have liked against the Force, but there's still plenty more to come from them.
Stephen, you need to unmute.
I thought I'd look back to 2020, at least the first part of Super Rugby, because just out of interest, the Crusaders were leading when the competition was shut down proper, and that was after, I think, the 7th round. The Crusaders were leading on 30 points. The Brumbies were on 28, and the Reds were on 25. Those were your top 3 teams, guys. We shouldn't forget that. That was when we had the full quota of Super Rugby teams running around last year. So I can recall one very good game as well. That was round 6 against the Crusaders down in Christchurch. And the Reds were very, very unlucky not to have won that game. In fact, they scored a couple of brilliant tries that night. So they've actually been a team on the rise for a very, very long time. Now, we underestimate these guys at our peril, for crying out loud. And we always know that the Brumbies have had a distinctive style. If they get in the red zone, yeah, they're going to maul. I think their hookers picked up the highest try scorer for a couple of seasons in a row, hasn't he? So they know how to use that weapon very, very well. So let's not underestimate these guys when we come to play them again, because with a few more games under their belt, they'll be way better. Simon Hughes also asked the question before, is it good for Australian rugby, the Waratahs? To me, it doesn't matter. The Blues were rubbish. The Blues were rubbish for years. It didn't take it didn't stop for the All Blacks from transgressing. That's what I'm saying. Just because you've got a big area doesn't mean, they farm a lot of players out to other parts of the union. Yeah, even the Highlanders as well. Props them up as well. The Waratahs do exactly the same. They farm a lot of players out to other parts of Australia. Maybe their big problem is a little bit like the Blues. They don't know how to pick the good ones. But you can see that the Blues have obviously changed that in the last couple of years or so, guys. So let's not get too cocky, because remember how we got cocky when we split that competition up last year. Yeah, sure. There's 2 or 3. We all know that Australia doesn't have the depth, but when you come to international rugby, you just need 23 good guys. Mm-hmm. And remind me, didn't we get beaten by these guys last year in a test match?
The Pumas?
No, the Australians.
We did, and the retribution was pretty swift and brutal as well. So
the Pumas flattered to deceive, in my opinion. Yeah, they got that great result last year, but they flattered to deceive.
Simon, one other thing I have to say is with Michael Checker not being in the coaching box any further. I mean, he had a big bias towards the New South Wales players, and guys, this is my opinion. I mean, looking how he selected players over his tenure, he'd always pick the New South Wales guys, and now with different coaching staff, I think we will see more and more players where they will start getting younger players, blooding them into the system, looking to build towards 2023 and probably beyond. So it's not necessarily a bad thing that New South Wales aren't doing well and they're struggling a wee bit. And it's probably a bit of a transition period for Rugby Australia as well. So we'll wait and see. And as you guys pointed out, there's some real good players out in the other teams as well. So it's going to be an interesting time coming up.
Yeah, so I'll just throw it there on the screen for those who are watching the recording rather than on the podcast. The results of the All Blacks last year, so you can remember the Australia got both the draw and the win against the All Blacks. You say they just need 23. They've got 2 good teams in the Brumbies and the Reds. We could be seeing a decent Wallabies side predominantly out of those 2 teams. Any final points, boys, before we wrap up?
Well, if I'm going to give my good player, bad player report, like I seem to be doing at the moment from this game, Force, Fergus Lee Warner. I like to go a little bit out of the out of the obvious here. This guy carried a lot. Paul will back up the stats. I'm sure he'll be ready and going with that. Card carrier, good cleaner, but he always seemed to get over the advantage zone when he did carry the ball. And for the Force, there was something they probably did lack with some players not getting that forward momentum and keeping them forwards on the front foot. He was a good carrier throughout the game. But there wasn't too many standouts there. Well, there are guys like Bernard Stander, a guy who normally does that very, very well. I thought was a bit quiet for the Western Force. And I just have to go on and throw there. I thought Rob Carney was rather solid. A good few runs. But most importantly, with Rob Carney, and the biggest thing that he's going to be for the Force, high ball, he catches it. Every single time. He was flawless under the high ball. And that is something that teams just cannot attack the Force with, because he was sensational under that high ball, a real standout for the Force. So, mix it up. I think you can't just high kick to them and expect to get some free ball back. For the Brumbies, I've got one man only. I thought this guy was massive. And you probably wouldn't guess him if you had 14 guesses, because he was your 15th guy you picked out. Caden Neville. 19 carries for Fergus Lee Warner. Monumental. Get that stat board up again. Caden Neville for the Brumbies, Paul. Consistently a pain in the backside for the Force. How many rucks did he disrupt? Mauls did he disrupt? He was an absolute nuisance. If you're a Force fan, you'll be putting his face on the dartboard and throwing all your packets of darts at him, because he was an absolute pain. He just killed everything for a long period of that match. And a lot of those chances that the Force had throughout that game, he was the catalyst for the maul getting disrupted. He was a catalyst for the ball being slowed down, the ruck, or a turnover, or just something. He was into everything. And for a guy in the second row, there we go. See, who needs stats? You just watch this show and you got everything you need. 24 tackles, only one missed. But hey, for my opinion, it was more his breakdown work and more work. He was brilliant throughout. So there you go. Watch those guys in the future. It's all forwards for me, which is a bit weird. I don't normally pick on the forwards, but hey, I'll give the big props to Rob Carney.
For me, I have to say Harry Wilson. I think he's a real star in the making. He's got his tackle technique and entry point height sorted out. I think he's another Owen Finnegan in the making, except he's from the other side, Queensland Reds. Love his aggressive style. I think it'll be a really nice matchup to see him up against, I wish Jerome Kaino was in action, but he's not. So, real star to watch out from the Wallabies. He's going to have a big impact, especially on that forward pack. He's going to be a real nuisance for the All Blacks in some of the upcoming tests. So, for me, he's the real one to watch.
Mr. Harris, the lovely straw hat.
Yeah, just for me, a couple of reasonable crowds. It wasn't too bad. That's one of the better crowds I've actually seen for a Super Rugby game at Suncorp for a while. It wasn't full by any means, but it was good to see a good sprinkling of people there. And of course, at the Western Force, the disappointing thing for me though, why you'd have both games on the same night is beyond me. But you are attracting an Australian audience, so it's one of those things. But I would have probably had one on the exactly. Most New Zealand audience would have probably gone to sleep.
2 a.m.
Well, then if they hadn't gone to sleep through the first game,
watching Australian rugby at 2 a.m. is like, oh.
Yeah,
I have to confess, I caught the first half, so I'm a bit of a rugby nerd. What can I say?
Yeah, I'm a bit like Paul. I watched the first 20-odd minutes ago, but I think I could see the writing on the wall for the Western Force, and I just caught the rest of the game on the highlights package.
Shocking.
So.
Just shocking. Where's the dedication? Where's the 2 a.m., staying up, filing reports, getting in the big hitting information. And look at this, Paul's onto it already. Goodness me. Hey, you know what? Australian rugby, the Reds are going to dominate that. You've talked a lot about it. I think the Reds are going to be the team to watch this whole season for Australian rugby. But before Paul gets into his little outro, this has always gone on too long. But there was a yellow card in this matchup. No one's really talked about it. How did the Brumbies get away so long with not conceding that yellow card sooner? How many final warnings did they get in that game throughout before poor old James Slipper got slapped in the face with it? But I think got a bit of a free run on that yellow card for probably a good 10-15 minutes before they actually got it. Thoughts?
Specsavers. And guys, what I should have said was the matchup I'd really like to see is Harry Wilson up against Liam Squire. And that'd be a bruising one-on-one. And two very similar sort of players, very aggressive, and they're very good ball carrying options. I think Squire's got a bit of a variety in his game out wide. But I think that's going to be a matchup we could look forward to over the next few years, hopefully, provided that both of them are injury-free and ready for selection.
I hope Liam Squire has just found his hunger for the game again, because I just got the impression when he basically walked away from a World Cup opportunity, and the head wasn't quite right. So it'll be interesting to see if he actually first of all gets an opportunity with the Highlanders. They're very strong in the loose forwards, so we'll see how that plays out.
Straight in.
Absolutely. So, folks, we only had 2 games to talk about tonight, and we've already gone 3/4 of an hour. This is supposed to be a half-hour show on a Sunday evening. When we get 4 games next weekend, I'm sure we will manage to get back under a half hour, or at least under 2.5 hours at least, before the for that one. Look, we've got lots of coverage here on New Zealand Sports Radio. 7 a.m. every single morning. We have the morning sports briefing. We keep up to all the scores and the important sports news. Swinging from the hip at 8 p.m. on Mondays. That we'll be back with rugby again on Tuesday evening at 8 p.m. The Driving Maul show. Obviously, we've covered off on the games here, so it's not about the game. It's about the new. It's about the kind of all the news around the sport in that one. And I'm sure Boa will be wanting to talk about 5 red cards in the on Tuesday evening. Wednesday evening, we've got the standoff show. We've got a pre-season special for you where Brad will be running through the 5 players he sees as being standout for the Warriors and 5 players who need to step up. We'll be previewing the games on Thursday evening at 8 p.m. All 4 of the Super Rugby games next weekend. And next weekend, we'll see. We might have some post-match reactions straight after the games. That's going to be an ad hoc thing, folks, before we have the next newsletter at 9 a.m. on Saturday, which covers off on all your A-League news. And obviously, we'll be back here on Sunday at 8 p.m. yet again with the Super Rugby review show. So, great to say 99,000 apparently viewers watching the Waratahs versus the Reds game, and in a head-to-head clash with the tennis. So hey, look, with the Australian Open on, not a bad start there for Super Rugby AU with their viewing figures. Thank you, boys, for joining me. And as I say, folks, plenty of content coming to you, or plenty of shows coming to you here on New Zealand Sports Radio. And don't forget, I was at the Jet Sprint yesterday, so a whole bunch of videos and interviews coming up from the Jet Sprint as well.